I didn't exactly know how to play the game. It was not particularly intuitive. Not that that's a bad thing on the game. It literally starts you next to the guide, which you're supposed to reference and supposed to talk to. I did not do those things, so I made it hard on myself. It doesn't have anything to do with the game. It was just me not knowing how to utilize the game and the tools that the game gives you. Once I started utilizing the guide, night and day difference, became a much easier game to play.
Welcome, heroes and villains, to Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel. Take a moment, relax, stop your bickering, and just enjoy the show. So, any idea why Minecraft started getting buggy on your computer and you had to switch?
So the newest update, the Caves update, introduced, I don't know, however many more levels. Basically, wherever Bedrock was, it made however many more levels of blocks beneath that. And I just think that was too much to render at one time. And also, I had an already established world. So it was having to make those changes to beneath what I had already discovered or what had already been loaded um, as I was playing. And since I was pretty far along, I mean, you can go back and watch the series. I don't know if I ever completed it. Maybe I did. I don't know. Irrelevant. I had been so far along in the game and made, so many, maybe not technology, but I'd built a lot of things. So it wasn't like a brand new map, everything's loading for the first time and then being done. It was like building the new stuff on top of the old stuff. And I know through many iterations of Minecraft, sometimes that can be a big problem. And particularly on my setup, it was a really big problem. And I could play it fine. I just couldn't play and record fine, if that makes any sense.
So, you're rather limited on what your computer can handle then.
Absolutely. um, I've kind of dipped into older games, like just very recently, but not to get off topic, Terraria was pretty easy to run. I would say that anything marginally more taxing on the system would probably be pretty hard to run on this computer.
As someone who played Terraria and ignored the guide, what's the learning curve like for Terraria?
Without the guide, it's pretty high. And once I discovered I could just hand him items and he could tell me what I could make with it, uh, it became pretty easy. But I recently had a conversation with somebody that was kind of giving me hints and helping me out. Shout out to Nathan in my chat during all my live streams and hanging out in my Discord. He kind of helped me figure a lot of things out. But once I learned you could give him items, everything became much easier. Right. In terms of difficulties outside of just like the learning curve with the guide, because it's an open world, you can run into things that are way more powerful than your particular level. So one of the major issues I had, and I discussed this, one of the major issues I had was you don't necessarily know what level you are in relationship to maybe this particular boss or this particular boss. Uh, I guess the community, great community, by the way, fantastic community. I'm sure any Terraria community would be like, oh, here's how I got through this, here's how I got through this, here's how I got through this, and the wiki's pretty good. If you don't have ad blocker, you might have a tough time with the wiki, but I mean it's any wiki page, any free page. It tells you step by step each armor set and its power level in relation to the next one or the previous one. So as long as you follow the wiki or just, ask whoever in order, if you are wearing the most up to date armor and using the most up to date weapons, it's relatively maybe not necessarily easy, but you're not going to necessarily have a bad time. Like if you're a decent gamer, in terms of difficulty, most of it weighs on where are you at as far as your gear and where are you at as far as how well you can play the game.
Didn't you do after you did your casual playthrough? Didn't you do a hardcore playthrough of Terraria?
I have yet to complete a hardcore playthrough of Terraria, despite basically my entire chat saying, no, only really hardcore players attempt this. I wanted to give it a try. Most of the time, I've died. I died once by being kind of like cornered by too many enemies and I couldn't escape. Most of the other times that I've died were traps. So it'd be late in the stream. Most of the time I've died was like late in the stream. I was getting close to going to bed. I'm like, oh, I'll just make one more push, or I'll just explore this one more area, and I get blown up by a chest, or I have a boulder drop in my head, or something like that. These are, if you're diligent, right? If you're really paying attention and reminding yourself, hey, a single trap could end this whole run. If you remind yourself every single time, you'll probably get pretty far after dying like a dozen times. Like it's kind of as to be expected. But if you're not paying attention, hardcore mode is probably gonna wreck your stuff.
I have a feeling there's going to be another hardcore run next week.
If not next week, then sometime soon. I recently, and again, I don't want to get off of Terraria. I know this is about Terraria. I recently got into a particular classic game that I hadn't played for many years, and I don't know if I want to go right back to Terraria because I'm kind of like in the zone for this particular game. But when I do return to Terraria, which could be next week, could be 2-3 weeks from now, probably not more than that. I really want to get back on those hardcore runs and like really hone my craft. I don't know. Get better at it. I will absolutely be returning to hardcore mode. I have not tried journey mode, but I don't necessarily know if it's my play style. I'll give it a try. Like I'm not against it. Just from what I hear, it's just not my style. I'd rather do like the grinding, the open sandbox, you know, farm for weapons, farm for armor, really build the character up and like go for a really solid run. The last time, like I said, I built up a lot of momentum on the last run, and it was toward the end of the night. I got antsy. I was not as diligent as I should have been. I rushed the gun, blew myself up, but yeah, I'll definitely be giving it another try sometime soon.
Is there a story that goes with Terraria?
Oh, in terms of lore, I mean, somewhat, right? So I don't want to give away the final boss, but there is a little bit of lore behind the final boss. And if there's a lot of lore, Terraria players don't beat me up. But it if you don't know the lore, assuming there is some, there is kind of a loose tie together with the bosses and maybe how to summon the bosses or how you trigger the boss fight or whatever. That maybe could be considered lore. So the very first boss, so like not really a spoiler, but the very first boss is like King Slime. After a certain point, I don't know if it's a timed thing, I don't know if it's a gear related thing, but after a certain point, an event will trigger called It's Raining Slime. And if you kill too many slimes, I think the number is like 100. It's pretty low, particularly when it's actually raining slimes, like you're killing a whole bunch of slimes. So it's not hard to kill 100. So you kill 100 slimes, and the Slime King comes out. Presumably because you made him angry for killing all the slimes, right? I don't know if that counts as lore, but it's kind of a neat and interesting way to trigger a boss fight, perhaps. Another one is, I don't know. Most of the boss fights are events or a triggered fight. The second boss fight, and I won't go beyond this. The second boss fight is like Evil Eye or Eye of Cthulhu or something, and you get to a certain gear, right? You upgrade to a certain level of gear and you upgrade to a certain level of life. Like you run around collecting life crystals until you know, that's how you level up. So you get to a certain point of life, you get to a certain point of gear, and at some point, it'll just say something evil is watching you. So I don't necessarily know if that's a lore thing, but I really like the flavor of it. Just the way it comes about, the way it starts. Something evil is watching you. An army is approaching. You know, you slay a bunch of slimes and you piss off the Slime King. I think that's at least a creative way to initiate a boss fight or, you know, make for boss fights to naturally occur in the game. Lore wise, I don't know if there is some. Don't beat me up, but I really do like that aspect.
If the boss fights are triggered by events, does that mean some of them are skippable?
So, in terms of reliably skippable, I don't know. Um, when I was playing not hardcore, when I was just casually playing, I know that if I triggered a boss fight, I could like teleport back home. So if I got far enough away from the boss, it would kind of wipe away the event. You wouldn't gain anything from it. It's not like, you know, avoiding an event in D&D, right? If you successfully navigate some kind of boss fight or event in D&D without actually having to fight, in some cases, you'll still get the reward. In this game, it'll just wipe away the encounter and, you know, just kind of end it until you re-trigger it or do it again. When I was playing hardcore, I triggered some kind of boss that I had never seen before, but chat was blown up. They're like, "Get away from it! You need to get out of here!" So, you know, everybody's freaking out. I didn't know why, but I guess I triggered a boss called Deer Clops, which is as hard as or maybe stronger than any pre-hard mode boss, which I'm not going to get into that. There's a first half and a second half. The second half is hard mode. So there you go. So I somehow magically triggered Deer Clops, don't know how. And so I was like, oh, I'll just teleport back home and run away. Well, I did that, and the event never ended. I even checked my map, and he kind of hung around in the same place that I triggered him on the map. So he didn't chase me, but the event never ended. The only way to end that particular event was to like log out, or like end the, you know, save and quit and exit the game and then re-enter the game. So some of them might be avoided, some of them might not be. I'm sure that would be on the wiki, and it might also depend on the difficulty that you're playing on.
Did it require much planning to beat the final boss in the first playthrough?
I would say yes. So once you get to hard mode, so you beat the first half of the game and you basically hit that halfway point, everything shifts. All the monsters, all the encounters get way harder. Like even the natural mobs that occur get way tougher. That's actually as frustrated as I was first starting out, not using the guide. First starting out in hard mode was first playthrough extremely frustrating. That's actually where I had the most qualms and realized one of the very core issues that I had with the game, which are very limited. I don't have a whole lot of issues with the game, but once you hit hard mode, it really is get the next set of gear. And then once you acquire the next set of gear, get the next set of gear. And it becomes very, as soon as you switch over to hard mode, it is gear oriented 100%. Like just go get whatever the next necessary thing is to wear or use as a weapon, because the mobs around you in these environments are unforgiving and the bosses are worse. So, in terms of like, do you have to prepare? When you do a boss fight, you'll generally, maybe in almost every case, yeah, I'm pretty sure in every case, get weapons or armor or both. I mean, some kind of item. But you don't get the full spread of possible items from that event. And there's even some like mobs, natural mobs that occur that drop items and things. I know for like 3 days, it was like I don't know how many hours of, live game time that I grinded, ground, whatever. I was grinding the dungeon in post hard mode, like in hard mode, for a single shield, and the drop rate for that shield was like 5%. It was like remarkably low, and not only was the drop rate for this item remarkably low, but the mob that drops the item is a rare spawn mob. So it was like double rare. And so I grinded whatever for like 3 days until I finally acquired this one shield. And so I guess you could apply the same thing to boss fights, but for the most part, like first of all, anytime you trigger a boss fight, you're guaranteed to fight the boss. So like that whole chunk of time of like having to wait for the mob to appear and run around looking for the mob, that was kind of removed. So that was much quicker. And the amount of like drop rate per item is all the same to my knowledge. So let's say the boss has one set of armor that's a 2-piece or 3-piece set of armor, that's 3 items, and let's say it has 3 weapons. Okay, so theoretically, which that's not how math works, but theoretically, you could fight the boss 6 times and get the full spread of items that he drops. Now, I think the worst one that I had before the final boss was Duke Fishron, and I was trying to get the bow that he drops. I don't know. There was one particular item that Duke Fishron drops that I really wanted to use to enter like the last stretch of the game. So the last stretch of the game is a series of a handful of bosses. I'm not going to describe it, to anybody out there who's a fresh player. But the last stretch of the game is a handful of bosses, and I wanted one particular weapon from Duke Fishron before I entered that stretch. And I bet I fought this guy like 10 times. And to fight this guy, you have to go into a specific biome and catch a specific bug with a bug net. And you have to like, it was a very long and tedious process. And by the end of it, I thought I was going to be pulling my hair out. But I mean, I think those two examples, the shield from the one particular mob in the dungeon and farming whatever weapon from Duke Fishron was probably the most extreme examples of having to like farm for items.
You, as my penultimate question, you said that you had some issues with the game that probably new players might have the same issues. It is a great game. I've played enough of it to know it's a great game. But what are your issues that you have with it?
Okay, so any advice to a new player? The guide is your friend. Anybody who's watching my newest uploads, my edited videos, I am just talking trash on the guide for the whole like first 2 or 3 episodes. But the guide really is your friend, and any item that you bring to him, he will tell you everything that you can craft with that item. It doesn't hurt to look at the wiki in terms of order of difficulty in like weapons and armor, or at least order of quality, right? I i at least recommend checking out the wiki to make yourself a little list of the armor and the order that you could potentially get the armor. It's pretty much laid out, but there's like 2 or 3 that overlap in terms of strength, power. So at least if you get the general idea of the order of the items that you get, then everything else can basically just you pick up a drop, any mob drop, give it to the guide. You pick up any block, give it to the guide. Um, the one thing that astounded me, really, that astounded me with Terraria is just the sheer number of items in that game. It far surpasses, and I don't even think it's a competition. I don't even think it's like it's not even a fight. It's not even a fair fight between the number of items in Minecraft and number of blocks in Minecraft and the number of items and blocks in Terraria. It is far, far and away way greater. I mean, I don't know, orders of magnitude, but 5 times, 10 times more items. That might even be a low number. So the guide is your friend, and it doesn't hurt to peek at the wiki. Don't spoil anything for yourself if that's, if you really want to experience the game, but reach out to the community. It's everybody's been great when I ask questions. Most people, shoot, almost everybody that I've asked was more than happy to give me advice. The guide is your friend, and the wiki is your friend. And of all games, have fun. Don't get too frustrated. If the game is being, if you are particularly frustrated with the game, it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that you could be doing something better. Gear, method of fighting, things like that. Method of play, gear that you're using. If you're in a tough spot, if you're in a rough spot, check your gear, check your play style.
Like to, I always like to end my conversations, my interviews, whatever you want to call them, with this question. Is there anyone or anything you would like to shout out at this time?
Currently, I'm just happy that, Nathan and everybody else that comes by and Help for Gamers, Cinder Shadow Gaming, um, Crash Test, Wrath of Wood, a bunch of people that come and hang out, just anybody who comes to hang out, and obviously you, Fjook, you're included in this, but anybody that comes to hang out during the live streams, it makes the content much better. It makes the time go by faster. Maybe not faster, but it's a better time. Anybody that's answered questions, Oofy, I think is his name. There's a couple others. Sorry, guys. But yeah, there's a few people out there that dropped a lot of hints, helped me through really difficult and some confusing, maybe less intuitive methods of gaining items in the game. Just anybody in my chat who's helped me out and provided information, I'd like to shout those people out.
Thank you for your time. I enjoyed the conversation. I will, as like I did last time, I will give you a link as soon as it's up. It might be a while, but as soon as it's up, I'll give you a link.
Thanks, Fjook.